Hey friend, I'm Danielle Damrell, and I am so grateful that you're listening to the Created Worthy podcast. This show is all about honoring the life stories of women from different ages, beliefs, backgrounds, and experiences. Everyone's got a story, and instead of getting stuck in the trap of unworthiness, this is a safe place for stories to be shared. On this show, we chat about the transformative power of creative processing too, and how we can utilize our God-given creativity with intention to heal, grow, find joy, create simplicity in the midst of our chaotic lives. So pull up a seat at our table because we are all created worthy. Hello, welcome back to the Created Worthy podcast. Today is a very special episode with two people that I've had the honor of working closely with for most of this year. Instead of just sharing their bios, I'm going to start by sharing a portion of their story before we jump into the conversation to talk more about the incredible things that they are creating together. So in the vibrant city of Philadelphia, Dr. Myava Clark's life unfolded as a compelling narrative filled with both the ongoing themes of resilience and advocacy. With a stellar educational background in respiratory therapy, elementary education, and higher education leadership, Dr. Clark has dedicated years to others, both in the medical field as a college professor and eventually as a devoted mother. Her journey took an unexpected turn when both her children, Chris Jr. and Kyra, faced unique challenges. Chris Jr. with learning differences and Kyra with medical issues. Armed with her master's in elementary education, Dr. Clark navigated the complexities of the educational system to champion her children and her children's rights, later chronicling her experiences in the book Help, Support for Parents of Children with Learning and Thinking Differences. This book is a fusion of personal antidotes and comprehensive resources, and it has become a lifeline for parents seeking guidance. Inspired by their own story, Dr. Clark co-founded CASEN LLC with Chris Jr., a venture dedicated to supporting parents of children with learning and thinking differences. Their collaboration birthed CASEN Outreach, an initiative where Chris Jr. passionately addressed youth on topics like online bullying and social media readiness. Chris Jr.'s entrepreneurial spirit flourished and is fueled by a desire to protect children from the darkness that can be a problem on social media. His vision, CASEN Connect, emerged as a secure space for children to practice social skills. This initiative, accompanied by CASEN Educational Social Network Wellness Academy, aimed to equip children with tools for social wellness beyond the virtual realm. Chris's commitment extended beyond business success. It resonated in his fervent belief that every child deserves respect and protection from bullying. His advocacy echoed through podcasts and outreach programs, emphasizing self-confidence and empowerment. As mother and son joined forces, their story unfolded as a powerful testimony of overcoming adversity, fostering change, and reshaping the narrative for children facing learning and thinking differences. In the heart of Philadelphia, Dr. Myava Clark and Chris crafted a legacy of resilience, innovation, and unwavering dedication to the well-being of every child. Dr. Myava and Chris, thank you so much for joining us on the Created Worthy podcast. I can't wait to talk even more about your real life stories.
Thank you, Danielle. We are truly grateful to be here with you. Like you said, we met and worked together for the majority of this year. I truly am grateful to have you a part of my life now and what you have to offer. So thank you for including us on your podcast.
Yeah, thanks.
Of course.
Thank you for having us.
It's an honor. I'm so excited to have you both here. So you both were authors in the Living All Out book that was published back in August. And actually, your chapters were the ones that closed out the book. We did that on purpose because your chapters work so they're obviously very closely intertwined. But Chris, You are the one who closed out the book. And I just thought that that was such an incredible way to really just display what living all out fully means, to just close that, to for readers to know that as they're reading that book and reading your story at the end, it's just a really powerful example that truly anyone can live all out if you set your intention, you trust the Lord, you seek the good, and you fight for justice and what is right. And you both have done that in such an incredible way. So it is truly an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. So I would love for you to just start with whatever portion of your story you feel like the Lord has put on your heart to really dive into during this conversation.
Okay, you want to start?
Um, you can start.
Okay. Well, first I will say that when you have children, you only expect the good. You go into, especially when it's a planned pregnancy, you really look for the positive. You don't look for unexpected turns or anything. And my husband and I, when we got married, we actually lost our first baby. We had a miscarriage. And that was unexpected. We didn't expect that. And as a respiratory therapist, my primary unit of care was the neonatal intensive care unit.
Mm.
So working in the NICU, I see all kinds of things. And then working at the NICU of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which meant that we saw the sickest children in the country, you know. So in that moment, I learned that there is positives in every negative situation. You must be willing to look for the positives. Mm-hmm. And in such a painful experience, I prayed and I asked God, what was it that I was supposed to get from this experience? Because it was so painful. I didn't want to have to go through it again if I didn't need to, if there was a lesson to be learned. And in that space, I became very grateful, even in something so unfortunate. And what I was grateful for is I wasn't further along in my pregnancy. I didn't have a stillborn baby. And I didn't have to watch my child suffer like so many of the children I took care of. And I say those things because my heart pours out to the parents that are in those situations. So, right. I'm very compassionate toward those. So my point for sharing that story first is there's a positive in every situation, no matter how dark your situation is, if you're willing to look for it. Yes. And that happened early on in my marriage. So I think that has channeled the trajectory of how I looked at things. So when Chris came along and had challenges, it was always easy for me to find hope in those moments because that's the way I chose to live.
Right. Yeah. So it was a practice by that point. You had trained yourself to look for the positives. So when you found out that Chris had some learning differences, can you take us back to that time in your life? And Chris, I would love for you to speak into this as well. Do you remember learning differently than the other kids you were in the classroom with? Or how did you find out that you had some thinking differences or learning differences?
Growing up, I kind of figured something was up, but because I was a late note taker, like that's kind of like when I realized it, but like when I when it actually hit me was fifth grade, and it was when middle of class I'm just going along like everybody else. And I get pulled aside and they let me know I'm I'm changing classes. And then because that was the first time that I changed class in quite some time, and that's when I realized, yeah, I'm different than everybody else. And just as I got older, the more I kind of started to understand like what the differences were, and then I think when it fully hit me was like mid high school, I believe is when everything kind of like made sense to me.
Mm,
And then
yeah.
like and that's when everything kind of just kind of when I understood like the reality, like okay, like what was going on. Like Bob always kind of knew a little bit, but like the older I got, the more the pieces became clearer.
Yeah. So I want to go back to that in just a minute, but before we do that, Myava, can you talk to me about your experience when you started to notice that Chris was having some differences in his learning styles and what you did as a mom um, to advocate for him?
Sure. Well, Chris has two first cousins, one on my side and one on his dad's side, and they are 6 weeks and 3 months older than him. So being around the boys, we saw some of the things that they were doing. Like, for example, they were able to toss a ball at a year and a half, and Chris's ball would go maybe a foot and a half and fall. So that was one of the things that we noticed, like his dexterity and his mobility
Mhm.
was a little different. And Chris had receptive language where he could receive what we were saying and follow our commands. And we didn't notice that Chris had a speech problem because we always understood him. And it wasn't until other people would be around and say, "What did he say?"
Mm.
And we realized we were interpreting for him. And then he his gait was different running. So we just noticed we had some cues, and everybody kept saying, "Oh, every child is different. They all grow at their own pace." But Chris Sr. and I, it was just too many coincidences. So we went to his pediatrician and expressed our concerns, and she recommended that we went to the intermediate unit and had him tested. And that's when we realized he was developmentally delayed in speech, physical, and occupational therapy. So we started with early intervention, and it was us who fought for it as opposed to someone telling us that they spotted something. We were the ones that
Yeah.
advocated early on for him.
How old was he?
2.5.
Oh, so it was really early on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we noticed it when he was even younger. Like I said, when he was a little over a year, we noticed some differences. But because everyone kept saying, "Oh, every kid is different. They grow at their own pace," we waited and waited, and then by the time he was 2.5, we had him evaluated, and he started therapy by the time he was 3.
Okay. And did those therapy types, did you continue those throughout school, Chris? Yeah.
Yes. I think the I think the last time I saw like some sort of person within the school was in the beginning, maybe I believe in the beginning of my senior year. So like as I got older, certain the stuff started fading out. But I think the last time that I was like done everything of that might have been either late junior year or early senior, I believe.
So most of the way through your education,
Yes.
you're, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm admire you, one, Maeva, for acknowledging it's kind of a hard thing to acknowledge when you have a child that you're like, there's something that's just different. Like I can tell that they need more support than, an neurotypical child
Right,
or children that they're around. And then but you can kind of like doubt yourself, right? And so
right.
to take him at 2.5 and to be like, I need him evaluated, or I need to know, is he on course? Um, I just admire you and your husband for doing that. And good job. And Chris, it's great that you were able to stick with those therapy types all the way throughout school. Um, because I'm sure that that has played a huge part in why you've been so successful at such a young age, right? In
Right.
overcoming and inspiring so many other people. Um, you've done the work. You've done the
Yeah.
work that probably a lot of people didn't think that you were even capable of doing, and you've gone above and beyond. So before we get back to you, Chris, and we're going to talk more about your experience in high school, Myava, you had another child. What is the age difference between Chris and Kyra?
They're 20 months apart.
Okay, so right around the same time that he was being assessed for developmental delays, um, you had
Oh,
another baby.
yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
And
Can
when she was born, did she immediately start having medical issues, or was that something that came later?
Again, they're 20 months apart. And when Kyra was born at 6 weeks of age, she was diagnosed with a condition type called neurofibromatosis. And that is a condition where tumors can spontaneously grow on the nerves and cause a lot of pain. And some people may liken it to fibromyalgia or something like that. That's a more common disorder that most people have heard of. And usually it's genetic, but Kyra has a spontaneous form
Mm,
of NF. All her tumors are internal, you can't see them. Where some people you may see growths on, it's a different type of NF where they may have external growths.
mm,
So we had to have her evaluated regularly by a regular pediatrician as well as an NF specialist throughout her life. And she was asymptomatic, meaning she didn't have any symptoms of this condition until she was about 14 and a half.
oh, wow. So how did you know that she had it?
With this, one of the most common ways of diagnosing it was birthmarks. These
Mm,
children have like these freckles that are irregularly shaped all over their body,
mm,
and the location of them are where most people don't have birthmarks. Like, for example, the average person doesn't have birthmarks under their armpits,
mm,
and people with NF, they can. And so it was the number of birthmarks, the shape of the birthmarks, and the location of the birthmarks that was like a red flag for them.
mm,
And when Kyra is 24, so this disease is becoming more known now because they are able to do research. But when she was diagnosed, it was very little out there. So we had no way of really knowing. It was all speculative. There were no tests to really confirm it. But when she was by the time she was about 5 or 6, they had identified a blood test, and then she had the test, and it confirmed the disease.
mm,
Chris was the diagnosis we received from him was just developmental delays. We didn't have any other concrete disorders or things that made it easy to treat. Like he wasn't diagnosed with ADD or autism or anything where they may have a particular plan that they follow to treat the average child with those diagnoses. Therefore, it made things even more complicated for us to find what worked for him, because Chris had some general education courses, he had some special education courses, he had some 100 level courses. What I mean by that is there was no one size fit all for him. So we had to really fight and advocate for him to get what was appropriate. So just because he needed services in one area didn't automatically mean that he needed services in another, which made it extremely challenging for the family to make sure that we were meeting his needs adequately. I really felt like that was important to say, because prior to us, the school district hadn't experienced that, to my knowledge, and they really wanted us to fit a particular model, and we didn't.
Right.
We knew he needed help, and we wanted him to get help, but we didn't want him to get more help than he needed, and we didn't want him to get less help than he needed.
Right.
And fortunately, by the time he finished school, they had accepted that for him. And after he graduated, I talked to another parent and found out that that's how they do all the children now. They tailor things for them specifically. And I'm happy that our advocacy for him meant that we championed that same right for other children. So I'm really happy about that.
So when you found out that both your son and your daughter had challenges, how did you handle that? You and your husband handle that news as parents?
The greatest thing in all of it is we had each other, and we supported one another. And when I was at a low point, he was usually high. And if he had a low point, I was usually high. So we kind of balanced each other out emotionally. And I am a person of faith. So I pray a lot. I have a very spiritual family background. My mother was a pastor, my aunts pastors, so I grew up in the church in the fear of God, and I relied on that for my support in particular. And we have a very good, strong family network and support system.
Yeah, I love that. So your faith was a huge part of being able to just trust God with your future, like of being able to just continue to move forward, and know that all things were going to work out, right? Like in the Bible, it talks about all things work together for the good of those who love him. And that is one of the most comforting things. When I think about faith, that's one of the most comforting truths that I think about, because man, when things go wrong, as they do in everyone's life, right? Like in your life, you were blindsided by diagnoses. Of course, like you said, when you get pregnant and you're having children, you think they're just going to be a normal baby. They're just going to be this. And the truth is, normal doesn't exist. Chris, if normal did exist, Chris is perfectly normal, as is Kyra.
Yeah.
But with that, as parents, like, you want to protect your children. You want to make sure that they have the same opportunities as everyone else. And the truth is that with thinking differences, learning differences, or a medical issues, like, that just means life is going to look a little bit different. So I'm sure as a parent to these two little kids, you're like, okay, God, you've given them to me, so surely you have a plan, right? And if you didn't have your faith, that would be a really, really hard thing to navigate. I would assume it would be a much more hard thing to navigate. So I do think that that's an important thing to talk about and to bring up, is that both you and your husband were able to lean on God, lean on our Creator to just have the future, like trust him with the future, and the next day and the next step. So as Chris and Kyra got into school and Chris had all of the support now, of different therapists, I know that there were still times that you guys had to figure out how to advocate for, specifically for Chris. I only say that because I know his story a little bit more. Um, and because you're with us here. So we might have to have you back on and have Kyra join us next time. There were times where, whether it was teachers or faculty or just common staff members in the educational system who just didn't understand Chris. And so you, as his mom, had to step in and be an advocate for him. What did advocacy look like? And did you have like a resource? I know that you created this resource now, but at that time, like, where did you find resources? Who did you lean on to figure out how to even do this and advocate for him?
Well, we really didn't have much except for each other. Like Chris and I really relied on each other. And when we went to meetings, we noticed that they tried to divide and conquer. Like as an educator, they tried to play on that piece with me, because they knew my background, which my husband was extremely vocal about his perspective. And when he didn't agree with something, he let it be known. So then they would kind of look toward me for friendly eyes to try to, divide us in a meeting. And they never got that. We never gave them the satisfaction to separate us. And even if we didn't agree, we didn't disagree in front of them. Mm-hmm. Because there were times when I totally agreed with them, but they wouldn't know it. And what we would do is go home and discuss it. And usually the person who won the debate or the conversation or the decision was the one, most of the times, that was the most passionate for their reasoning or whatever. So sometimes we went my way, and other times we went Chris's way. So it just depended.
But you remained a united front.
We remained a united front. And I think as difficult and as challenging as it was for me, my heart really goes out to single parents, because it was still challenging for us and we had each other. I just couldn't imagine navigating that space by myself.
Yeah.
And so many people do it and they're successful with it. It's just even that much more challenging, I think, if you don't have that voice to run things by.
Yeah. And I love that what you've created is a space for married parents, single parents, any parents, kids, family members, grandmas, aunts, uncles. All of the people have a place within CASEN where they can find support, they can find resources. And we're going to get to that in just a minute. But before we do, Chris, I want to go back to you. And I want you to talk to us a little bit about your experience with bullying. You were very vulnerable in the Living All Out book about some specific moments where you were bullied by even people who you called your friends. And those experiences led you to having this desire to want to protect other kids from experiencing what you've experienced. So yeah, I would just love for you to tell us a little bit about the story you shared in the book, and then how that led you to the vision for CASEN.
Yeah, a couple key stories. When I got started kind of like online, I started vocalizing my how I felt politically, and I got nasty, rude comments from adults, and that was like and well, lucky enough for me, I had the support of my dad and his friends like coaching me through it and teaching, telling me like what to post, what not to post. That was like a major influence. But another thing that I can think of, something that I told in the book, um, some like just walking, like just walking in school one day, or walking home one day with my sister and couple so-called friends of mine. I like one day we were walking and I dropped my phone and we were looking for it for like maybe 15 minutes and couldn't find it. So my sister and I went on what I did, went home. And it turns out maybe like the following day or so, when I came home, my mom told me that the people I was walking with, when the guys took stole my phone and the other guy took videos of it with him on my phone. And I remember just being crushed. And like that's that like the stories like that is like hard to like forget and kind of turn my kind of switched how like my trust in. That's another reason why within me at least Cason even exists, and then why I try to push this thing so hard, because I don't want kids to go through with what I went through.
That, yes, I remember working through these stories with you earlier this year, and just I think there might have even been a moment where we both kind of teared up when we were writing these things and just talking about the impact of
Yeah,
these stories that unfortunately are pretty common, whether you have learning and thinking differences or not. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you do have some kind of difference, it can almost feel as if you're being targeted, right? Because they think
right.
that you're a little bit more naive. They think
I,
that they can pull the wool over your eyes and that you're not, they're nobody's ever going to know. They can get away with stealing something from you or taking something. And great, thankfully, you had an incredible family who was
yeah,
able to use their resources and knowledge to locate that phone and to address that situation. So, Myava, when you found out that it was actually his friends who had taken his phone, um, what did you do? Like, how did you support him in, walking through and walking forward in a positive way after something really challenging and clearly a bullying incident happened to your high school age son?
Wow, that was so hurtful, because Chris was extremely devastated at the time. Um, it really hurt to watch him navigate that space, because he just, for one thing, when you have learning disabilities, they started out as developmental delays, and later, when it lasts so long, they call them disabilities or whatever. But when you have those, a lot of times socially, you're a little awkward anyway, and you may not understand everything that typically developing children may be able to navigate in those social spaces. So to go through that with him and to see the hurt and everything, it was even more impactful than I think it would have been under any normal circumstances, or not normal, but any other circumstance. So it was just very painful. And one of the guys was someone that he hung out with, and it just was hurtful.
Yeah.
and to go back to coming up, but I that was one of a few moments as we were talking that I would where I choked up and kind of tear up thinking about, because prior to us talking about it through the book, I hadn't really like go of that
Mhm.
situation,
Yeah.
and the book was like healing within itself,
Mm.
and like a lot of stories
I'm
similar
gonna cry.
similar to that. Like it was just hard to like let go, but finally after like the book and like reading it again, it's kind of like I'm at a different place now thinking about it compared to where I was a few months ago.
Yeah. Well, I just have to say this, and I know that I've said this to you before, and this is for both of you, but really, especially for you, Chris. Um, I am so proud of you for writing that chapter, for doing the work, for showing up week after week, talking through all the different stories, deciding on what is processed, what can we process so that we can put it in the book and really write it in a way that is going to help inspire people and help people to see what your mission is for CASEN and where this vision came from and the just the ability for you to have your story um out there, out in the world. I hope that it gives you so much confidence, and it can serve as something for the rest of your life that reminds you that you can do anything and everything that you put your mind to, and that the Lord is doing a good work in you, and He has created you with divine purpose. To change lives, to inspire people, and to continue to live all out. I mean, for majority of the authors, I love every single one of the authors in that book, of course, but everyone is at least 10 years older, if not more, than you. And the Lord put you in a place where you are able to have your very own chapter in a book and be in that group at a very young age. I mean, how old are you, Chris, if you don't mind me asking?
25, and I'll be 26 next week.
Yeah. So 25 years old, and he's put you in a room with a bunch of people who have had very experienced lives, and a lot of them have children and a lot of them have adult children. But the Lord wanted you in that room in that book for a very specific reason so that you can learn these lessons now and you can just continue to grow and impact people and show them how to live all out. What a powerful message. There will not be another book like that with that group of people with that title, that focus of living all out. For a 25-year-old to say, I am truly living all out, despite having learning and thinking differences, despite walking through loss. The greatest loss you've ever experienced was your grandfather, and you talk a lot about that in the book chapter about your relationship with him and having experienced, bullying. But at 25, you were able at 20, actually, how old were you when you had the vision for CASEN? Was it before you graduated high school?
I was, it was my freshman year. I was
Freshman year in college.
freshman year in college. My bad.
Okay.
I was nine. It was I was 19.
19 years old. He has this vision. Myava, do you remember that conversation with him where he's like, Mom, I want to do this thing?
Yes, actually, he brought it up with my husband first.
Okay.
My husband asked him, "What do you wish you had in school that you didn't have that could help kids today?" And he brainstormed and came up with the idea of creating a social media app that would be prepare kids for social media, where his father and his father's friends were the ones that we call it policed his site to help him become appropriate on social media.
Yeah.
Yeah, he must have talked.
Yeah, I was just laughing thinking about it. Like I remember being like like in high school getting a text like from my dad like, Chris, what are you doing, man? Like gotta fix this, or he'll even call like I would get a text first like I'm about to call you, and he would call me and be like, Chris, you gotta edit this, you or take this down, and like
He
at the
was
time,
protecting you.
yeah,
Yeah.
at like 17. 18. I'm like, why dad? What are you doing? But like looking back at it, I appreciate it. Like that he and his friends like had my back at that point. And that's like a major level of why Houston even exists in the
Mm,
first place. Had I not had their influence early on, I don't know where A Houston would be and B where I would be. And like I Houston is kind of like a tribute in a way to them, like as like a
mm,
proper thank you.
I love that. So, Myava, let's talk about the creation of CASEN.
No,
So, what was, you had this idea. Um, you guys came together, decided, we're going to do this. We're going to make this thing happen. What was the very first thing that you set out to do? Was it create those communities? No?
no.
What was it?
So when he finally came to me and asked me to help create an app, I said yes. I didn't know the first thing about anything. I just took a couple basic computer classes in school that I needed to get a bachelor's degree, and that was it. So after I said yes, I went to the computer and I knew it wasn't enough just to create an app. I went and Googled what the gap was in education.
Hmm.
And then I found social emotional learning was a gap for kids. And I prayed and I asked the Holy Spirit to help guide me to creating this thing that I had no idea what I was trying to create. And searching the internet, um, I found a third party company that allowed you to create apps. And I literally, from watching YouTube, doing the internet, I created my own app. And what I liken it to for people is if an artist wanted to create something, they would sketch it first, and then that would give them the vision for what they wanted to do. Well, this app that I created was kind of like that. It was enough to build a dream and a vision for me.
Hmm.
And when I showed Chris and Chris Sr., they were on board. And what we did is we went to our school district and met with the superintendent of special education. And when she validated what we did, that's when we realized we were on to something. And she said, "This is good, but it could be better." And she told us what make it better. And she did that like on 3 separate occasions, and it kept going. And we realized my vision and thought was bigger than the platform could sustain.
Hmm.
So we wind up hiring consultants to help us with some ideas. And then we hired app developers to actually start from scratch to create our own platform. And then we did, in the meantime, while that was being built, we came up with CASEN Outreach, where we went into the community to teach kids how to be appropriate on social media. And we partnered or went with the Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General. They sent someone with us that taught the dangers of social media. And then we taught how to do social media appropriately. And we did that for churches and camps in the area.
Wow. I love that.
CASEN Education Wellness Academy, where we have courses, and we have 4 module blueprint courses, and they are social and emotional development, bullying identification, mental health development, and social media readiness. And we use these to really teach, not only do we teach the children, but we teach the parents the same content so the parents can better support their children and continue the conversation at home.
Hmm.
So we teach both parents and children these 4 courses, and then they get to practice what they've learned on CASEN Connect, which is our app, where it's by invitation only and it's designed to be a precursor for regular social media. And it is, I guess you could look at it as social media with filters and training wheels, because everything has to be approved by the teacher or facilitator before it goes live. And we do offer licensing for this content. So schools, psychologists, therapists, specialists, anyone that deals with groups of kids can borrow the license and teach it to their own group of children, as
Okay.
well as parents can come to us as individuals, and we offer facilitators to teach groups.
And is this app for just kids with learning and thinking differences, or is it for all kids?
It's for all kids can benefit, but we focus on that population because they're the more vulnerable population. And our age group is cognitively or developmentally between 9 and 13. So if it's a child who's 7, that's pretty advanced, they could probably do it. And if it's a child that's socially behind, that's 15, it could be appropriate for. So it really depends. So it's for any child, but our target audience is kids, neurodivergent.
So this is just a random question that came to mind just now, but what about if a teacher is listening to this and they're like, I wonder if this app could be helpful for, say, my group of third graders, right? They are not old enough to be on social media, but they are now starting to talk. They are now, wanting to connect with their friends more. They're probably like, for my daughter was recently diagnosed with combined ADHD. So she has a little bit of a thinking and learning difference. So they're learning now how to interact with children, who are in different developmental stages. Is there a way for a teacher to be like, I would love to have this app for my kids this year?
Absolutely. And that's what we're working out now. So we can present to schools and to teachers and different groups, and especially kids that are homeschooled that may not have the socialization. That I think what makes us unique and what I really am proud of is in our name, CASEN, Collaborative Advancement for Social and Emotional Needs. We did everything collaboratively, and every course was vetted through a speech language pathologist and a physical therapist. And then we took the content to a social emotional learning expert. And then after we got all of those pieces together, we took it to a general education teacher. And we really did collaborate
Oh, I love that.
on this stuff. So I did the research, built the course, and I vetted it through these different platforms. And then Chris and I, we had it the content piloted through typically developing children as our control group on Zoom. And then it was in an autistic high school classroom, was vetted in person.
Oh, that is amazing. So it's been tried, tested, approved by all of the people that it needs and should be. We know that social media wasn't.
Yeah.
So what you guys are doing a great work together. And then I know this year, Living All Out is not the only book that has been in your realm this year. So Myava, why don't you tell us a little bit about Help, your book that you released earlier this year, and what your vision is and has been for the future.
Help, support for parents of children with learning and thinking differences to feel confident, capable, and fulfilled, was created really as a support and a tool, a resource for parents to know that they're not alone, navigating the special education process, It's a really, really good introduction to all things IEP. I tell you who's at the table, who you can bring for as support for you as a parent, the just the whole journey and the process. I think the thing that I'm most proud of, there's a few things, but one of the things I'm most proud of is it's written from a parent perspective. But as an educator, I did a literature review, and there are over 100 references in this book to support parents. I did I defined every term. And then in the back of the book, there's a glossary of the terms. So the parents can go to my website, to our website, and go to the resource page and print out the glossary and take it to the IEP meetings with them. So when they don't
Wow.
know something, they can look it up and then ask informed questions based off of the definitions.
Yeah.
And I got Chris's approval. So after I wrote the book, he was the first person I asked to read it.
Uh,
Hmm.
China, it was great seeing it was great seeing every ifs and everything I did over my life in different stories that I didn't even remember, and it was great, and it was a great remembrance for me realizing who I was and what made me who I am. Like, and it was the first time that I really got to like see myself from another
From
perspective and
her
just
eyes. Yeah.
guys, and it was just learning, just relearning who I was,
Yeah.
and it made me further appreciate who I am.
Mm. I'm
And
sure that it was a eye-opening experience, Chris, to read that book from written from a parent's perspective, but not just any parent. Your mom wrote
yeah,
this book, and what she did is she created a resource manual, that the same resource manual that she needed, because she walked through the things that I'm sure, Chris, you probably have had no idea how much she had to advocate for you. And
yeah,
my guess is that reading the book made you realize like just how much, one, she's had to learn, but two, like even as you've become an adult, she's continued to learn because of your experience. Your having you as her son has motivated her to make an impact in the lives of parents who are in her shoes as well. So you guys are impacting um, related groups, but also very different, right?
right,
Myava, you can do a parent's perspective of going, finding out that your child has learning or thinking or medical differences or issues. Chris, you can speak to being in the shoes, but still having a brilliant mind who is operating perfectly fine, great, in fact, more better than I would bet to say a lot of people in this world who are 25 years old. Like you get to speak to people who maybe feel like because I have autism or because I have ADHD or because I've been diagnosed as developmentally delayed, I'm always going to be behind. I'm never going to be able to have a normal job or live on my own or, create in the same ways that other people create. And you're just showing everybody that you actually can. And then Maeva, what you're doing for parents is like, hey, just because things went a little bit differently than you had maybe expected when you had a child, that doesn't mean that your role as a parent is like gonna be miserable. I think sometimes when we think about those things, to be perfectly blunt, it's like, oh my gosh, if I have a kid who has special needs, my life is gonna be this way I just don't want it to be. And you're like, stop being afraid. It's actually a blessing in so many different ways. And you're not alone anymore. Like you've created a space for parents to no longer have to feel alone. I think it's a really scary, isolating feeling when you find out that your kid is a little bit different. And you're like, well, I can't relate to Susie Joe, my neighbor, or I can't relate to, somebody's classmate. But now they don't have to have those thoughts and just be stuck there. They can actually be like, oh, I have an entire community that I can plug into. I follow this woman on social media, or I've read this book that helps me to have the resources I need to go into a meeting with my child's principal and know what I'm talking about, know how to advocate. So I commend both of you. You both get snaps. You know I'm all about the snaps.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. So before we close up today, I just want to spend a minute talking about what is coming up next for you both in your lives and business.
You want to go?
I, I tend to go back to college in in the spring.
Ooh,
Some
yay. I also heard that you guys have some pretty big news about being featured somewhere. You want to talk
uh,
about that?
yeah, we within the last couple of weeks we were on Forbes, and it was just, and it's like when she told me, like she told me like the day before that it was happening, I was like, "Are you sure you're talking about Forbes, or some sort of affiliate?" But like now that it's been a couple weeks, it's finally starting to hit me like I'm on Forbes, and I'm at least reading the article at least 10 times a day, and it's just like
As
it's like
you
weird.
should.
It's just, yeah, that's like the biggest. It was just it's still hitting me.
Yes. And I'm going to get that link and I'm going to put it in the show notes so that all of the listeners can also go read that article on Forbes. I can't wait to read it
Yeah,
myself.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I have a new project coming out. It's called The Overwhelmed Parents Guide to Overcoming the Odds of Learning Disabilities, Medical Challenges, Mental Health Disorders, Physical Disabilities, and Trauma.
Wow.
So this book is for parents and caregivers who have overcome some type of adversity. And I'm looking for people either currently walking it out or who have already walked it out and they have adult children and they can reach back and help someone else. I believe there is healing in the story. I believe that God turns pain into passion and pain into purpose. And we overcome by the power of our testimony. So, us sharing our stories can help the people behind us to grab on the hope. And one of my favorite quotes is, where there's life, there's hope. And you can always hope for a better tomorrow. And I further that by saying, my best day ever hasn't arrived yet.
Mm.
I have not lived to see my best day because tomorrow might be that day.
Mm.
I just thought about.
Yes.
I remember you saying that very same quote growing up, and it kind of hit me when you just said it. I just wanted
Mm.
to get that out.
Yeah, because
Yes.
I choose hope.
Yeah.
And that's why I live in all out. I was the warrior of hope. So
Yes. Yes. And that is, I love that you landed on that title because that is exactly what you are. You are a warrior of hope.
thank you.
So before we close out, tell me one tip that you would give to any parent about social media readiness. How can they prepare their kids to be social media ready when that time comes?
The greatest advice I can give is trust your gut, trust your instinct, and have open communication with your children. The first thing that you need to do is have these authentic conversations so they will trust you to be open and have conversations and not be afraid that you're going to chastise them or vilify them for coming to you. You want to have that open relationship so that when they do feel picked on or bullied or sad, that they trust you enough with that information that they don't have to navigate that space alone, which can cause anxiety and depression. And then you're dealing with something totally different. So the single one thing is open communication and create that safe space.
That's wonderful. Chris, can you give us your number one tip? And maybe your tip should be towards the kids.
Just trust your parents when it comes to social media in the US that they give you, because looking back at it now, I wish I would have appreciated it a lot sooner than I did.
Yeah. So maybe to seek advice from your parents as
Yeah,
well. Yeah. So
that's what I
trust
was trying.
them,
That's what I was
but
trying to
seek
say.
them. Yes. I know you pretty
Yeah.
well. Well, you guys, I am so grateful to have spent some time with you here today and for your courage and your vulnerability to share your stories. What you are both doing matters on so many levels. Your determination to make an impact is not just apparent, but it is also actively changing the world. Don't stop telling your story and using your knowledge and resources to serve and protect other families in this ever-changing world. You, my friends, are created worthy. Thanks for listening and tuning in to the Created Worthy podcast. I hope that today's show resonated with you, and if it did, can you do me a huge favor and go leave a 5-star review? This helps more listeners find the show, and it expands the reach of the stories and concepts that are shared here. All the links and guest information are in the show notes. And if you're on social media, come hang out with me. You can find the Created Worthy podcast on both Instagram and Facebook, or come follow along with my personal IG page, where I just share more about the real, sometimes messy life of your fellow worthy warrior. Can't wait to talk to you soon, friend. And don't forget, we are all created worthy.